He walked into the bank he owned. But within minutes, the staff was watching him like a threat. By the time the police stormed through the doors, hands hovering near their belts, he already knew what was coming. He'd seen that look before, the quiet suspicion people pretend isn't there. But today would be different. Today, the man they assumed didn't belong was about to reveal a truth that would shatter their certainty, their pride, and every excuse they were preparing to hide behind. And when the manager realized who he had, just reported to the police, his face drained of color in an instant. Because some mistakes, you simply can't take back. Before we dive in, hit that like button and subscribe so more stories like this reach people who need to hear them. It was a calm Tuesday morning at Rivergate Community Bank, the kind of day where everything moved in a predictable rhythm. Customers waited in neat lines, printers hummed softly, and the faint aroma of cinnamon coffee drifted from the break room. Behind the counter stood Mark Ellison, the white, middle-aged branch manager known for his strict routines and even stricter instincts. Mark wasn't a bad man, at least. That's what he always told himself. He believed he was cautious, responsible, the type who could spot trouble before it started. And today, he thought he saw it. The glass doors slid open and a man in his early 50s stepped inside. He was tall, calm, dressed in a dark windbreaker, simple jeans, and well-used running shoes. No suit, no briefcase. No expression that matched the bank's usual clientele. He didn't walk to the counter. He didn't ask for assistance. He simply found a seat near the windows, pulled out his phone, and started reading something with quiet focus. But Mark noticed. Mark always noticed anyone who didn't match the polished suits and business casual regulars who usually filled the lobby. He returned to the loan files on his desk, and his eyes kept drifting first every few minutes, then every few seconds back to the man sitting alone, relaxed, almost too comfortable. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Customers walked in, completed their transactions, and left. The man remained, still scrolling, still waiting for something unknown. Mark felt a pressure in his chest, that familiar squeeze he labeled as instinct. Something about the man unsettled him, though Mark couldn't explain why. He didn't try. He leaned slightly toward Alex, the young teller beside him. "Keep an eye on that guy," Mark murmured under his breath. Alex looked up, puzzled. "You think there's a problem?" Mark cleared his throat once, sharply. "Just be alert." But inside, Mark already felt a decision forming, a decision he believed was caution. A decision that would soon expose more about him than he ever wanted to see. Mark tried returning to his paperwork, but the numbers on the loan forms blurred every time his eyes drifted toward the man in the waiting area. 20 minutes had passed with no movement toward the counter, no questions, no attempt to speak. With staff, the man simply waited, calm and still, as if time moved differently for him. Something about that patience made Mark uneasy. In his mind, people who had nothing to hide never lingered. They walked up, stated their purpose, and left. That was how a bank worked. That was how his bank worked. Another customer entered, a middle-aged woman in pearl earrings, who paused the moment she saw the man in the windbreaker. She hesitated, clutched her purse closer, and took the farthest line, stealing glances as if expecting him to stand up and do something. Mark noticed her reaction, and it fed the knot tightening in his chest. If she was uncomfortable, he wasn't the only one sensing something. Or at least, that's what he told himself. 23 minutes passed. Mark exhaled slowly, uneasy, feeling responsible for the safety of the branch, for his staff, for the customers, for the company's reputation. That's what he repeated internally: responsibility, not prejudice, not assumption. Just responsibility. He picked up the phone. "Yeah, this is Mark Ellison at Rivergate Community Bank," he said quietly. "I need officers sent over. We have a suspicious individual. He's been sitting here for nearly half an hour without approaching anyone." The dispatcher asked questions. Mark gave vague answers, clothing, posture, demeanor carefully avoiding the real reason. Just as he hung up, the man glanced up. Their eyes met for a brief, almost accidental moment. His expression wasn't hostile or anxious, just observant, like he had already guessed what Mark had done. And that tiny possibility made Mark's heart thump harder. Minutes crawled by until the reflection of blue and red lights flickered across the glass entrance. Conversations in the lobby softened. Tellers paused their typing, and a customer turned toward the door as two officers entered, one older, one younger, both carrying the stiff posture of men ready for confrontation. They approached Mark's station. "You called?" the older officer asked. Mark nodded and discreetly motioned toward the waiting area. He's been here a long time, watching the place, not approaching the counter. The younger officer raised an eyebrow, unsure, but followed his partner toward the man. Mark leaned forward, pretending to check a spreadsheet while listening closely to every word. "Sir," the older officer began, "we need to ask you a few questions." The man lowered his phone and looked up with a tired, almost resigned expression. "About what?" "You've been here for a while," the officer said, keeping his tone firm. "Can we see some ID?" The lobby fell silent. Customers stopped mid-sentence. Alex froze, his hands hovering above the keyboard. The man's response was slow, controlled. "Am I being accused of something?" "Not accused," the younger officer added quickly. "Just a routine check." Routine. The words stung the air. The man reached for his wallet, moving deliberately so there'd be no misunderstandings. He handed his ID to the officers, who studied it first casually, then more closely, then with confusion. The older officer's posture shifted. The younger officer blinked in surprise. Finally, the older officer turned toward him briefly, jaw tightening, and then spoke. "Sir, is this accurate?" "You're the new owner of Rivergate Community Bank?" The man nodded once, and the entire room seemed to stop breathing. The tension in the bank became almost unbearable. Every head in the lobby turned as the officer's realization sank in. The man in the windbreaker, calm and composed, was not a stranger, not a threat. He was Arian Cole, the new owner of Rivergate Community Bank. The older officer's jaw tightened. The younger one shifted uneasily, and Mark felt his stomach twist, as the weight of his decision hit him like a physical blow. He had called the police on the man who owned the place, a man who had every right to be there. And now, under the bright fluorescent lights, with every employee and customer silently watching, there was no excuse left. Arian's gaze swept slowly across the room, landing on Mark for just a fraction longer than necessary. There was no anger in his eyes, no shout, just a quiet, piercing disappointment that cut through Mark's chest. Arian leaned forward slightly, hands resting on his knees, and continued. "You saw a black man in casual clothes in a bank, and instead of asking if I needed help, you called the police. Was I dangerous, or was I just unfamiliar? Did you consider that I might have every right to be here?" His words were precise, measured, and they echoed through the lobby. Every employee and customer could feel the gravity of the moment. Whispers died, movements froze, and the usual hum of the bank vanished. Mark's hands trembled slightly as he realized the depth of his error. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a mirror held up to his own assumptions, his own blind spots. Arian stood, tall and calm, letting the silence hang before adding, "Do you do this for every customer, or only for the ones who look like me?" Mark's chest ached, not from fear, but from the dawning awareness that he had participated in an injustice, one that would stay with him far longer than the minutes it had taken to unfold. The officers stepped back, uneasy and silent, as Arian returned his ID to his pocket. He didn't yell. He didn't humiliate anyone. He simply looked at Mark, his expression steady but unreadable, and turned toward his office, leaving Mark frozen behind the counter. The lobby slowly returned to its usual rhythm, the printers whirring, the soft chatter resuming, as something had changed. Every employee, every customer, felt the weight of what had happened. Mark sank into his chair, hands trembling, heart pounding, and for the first time, he saw clearly how his assumptions had nearly caused a profound injustice. Later, as he sat alone reviewing reports, Mark couldn't escape the question that haunted him. If Arian had been any other black man in a hoodie, would the police have been called? Would the result have been the same? The realization settled heavily on his shoulders. Responsibility wasn't enough. Awareness was needed. He understood that being cautious could slip into prejudice, and that good intentions could still perpetuate harm. Mark knew he had work to do, not just as a manager, but as a person willing to confront his blind spots. This resolution ties the story to a broader reflection on societal bias and personal accountability. If you've experienced or witnessed injustice, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so together we can spread the message further.